Welcome to the Red Dice Diaries, and I'm joined by James Chambers. We're going to be having a discussion about fronts, which, for those of you who don't know, is a way of planning out adventures and campaigns and the series of events that form your plot. It's mainly featured within Dungeonworld, Apocalypse World, and other sort of powered by the Apocalypse style games. Now, for any of you who haven't played those games, this is just a brief, quick description of what fronts are. There are two types of fronts. There are campaign fronts and adventure fronts. Adventure fronts they normally take a few sessions to resolve. Those are your sort of little self-contained plots, whereas campaign fronts are your long-running plot arcs that span a considerable amount of time within your game. Each front is formed of 2 to 3 dangers, and these are enemies, plots, or places that pose a threat. And certainly in Dungeonworld, there's examples given like corrupt government, etc. And there's details given as to what sort of actions those dangers might take. They also are made up of an impending doom, one for each danger. And this is basically the final end game that will occur if the worst happens and that plot runs its course. So if you had a corrupt government who was attempting to subjugate the populace, then the impending doom would be, if they manage to subjugate the populace, what is their end game? What does the world look like when this hideous regime has stamped out all vestiges of rebellion? You also have a number of grim portents, as they're called in Dungeonworld, normally about 1 to 3 of them. And these are events that occur if the threats aren't checked by player actions, to let them know that events are proceeding and that things are underway. So to use my example of the oppressive government, it might be that a state of martial law or some particularly harsh laws are declared. And then finally, you normally have, according to Dungeonworld, 1 to 3 stake questions. And these are things that you as a GM are interested in finding out and that you play to discover. So this might be something like, how are the players going to react to these new harsh laws being brought in, or who's going to be a lead figure in the rebellion? And it's stuff that you don't so much define at the start, or you define it very loosely, but that you actually play to find out as the game goes on. So that's very roughly what a front is, as according to the Dungeonworld system. I'll try and find a few links for those of you who are interested in more detailed explanations and put them in the description to this video. So now I'm going to hand over to James. I believe, James, you've got some questions about how fronts work.
I'm reading, like I said, I'm reading Apocalypse World, trying to get my head around fronts. I'm reading Dungeonworld, trying to get my head around fronts. I'm also reading like Monsters of the Week as well, which they're called mysteries, I think, in like in Monsters of the Week. But right, obviously it's the same concept throughout,
Yeah.
But I mean, like in Dungeonworld, they don't have timers. Like in Apocalypse World, they've got a countdown timer, and I think not that I've read that far into Monster of the Week, but in Monster of the Week they've got a countdown timer as well, which doesn't come into Dungeonworld. It doesn't seem to come into Dungeonworld, but I'm sure if you knew how they work, you could just go, here, have a timer.
Yeah, pretty much I mean, I've got it, my experience is more of Dungeonworld, but pretty much the way it works in Dungeonworld is there are a series of what are called hard moves, and these are just a series of actions that the dangers, the enemies, etc., the organizations can take. So, for instance, to give you an example, the ambitious organizations type of enemy that's mentioned here, the sample moves it gives for that are attack someone by stealthy means, kidnapping, etc., attack someone directly with like hired guns or a gang or something, absorb or buy out someone important, maybe they corrupt an ally of the player characters, influence a powerful institution, we've already covered that a bit with changing laws, manipulating doctrines, etc., establish a new rule within the organization, claim territory or resources, negotiate a deal, or observe a potential foe in great detail. And I think from what I've read in Dungeonworld, fronts focus more on the sort of enemies and the challenges making these moves rather than it being a strict sort of countdown timer.
Yeah, I think I can't remember what countdown timers are used for, but no, I mean it does go into. I mean, for Apocalypse World, it does have a similar approach as well. With the I've now lost the page as well. I had the page a minute ago, but you got like their threats. They've got like warlords, grotesque, landscape, and stuff like that. So you know, I think it's the same. A lot of it's the same thing, just reskinned. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But I mean, the problem I have, and it's the problem I've had throughout my years of GMing, is I know because I'm dyslexic. I find it quite hard to get what's in there on a piece of paper, and but it's just trying to think, you know, how, you know, if you say for example, because I think fronts. There you go. I called it fronts again. I think fronts are I think especially for like a sandboxy game are absolutely amazing. I mean, I think you could take it. Doesn't even need to be used for Dungeonworld or Apocalypse World. I think you could take it to any game and use it in there.
I think you're absolutely right, James. I mean, I use a version of that in a lot of different games that I run, and the reason I find it so useful is because when I'm sat down planning a session, having all the fronts there in front of me, so I go, right, these are the main plots and these are how they should be developing. I can look at my notes and I can say, oh, right, okay, well, that evil horde that was approaching the city, I've not done anything for them in a while. What sort of things might an evil horde do? Oh, right, okay, they're going to start menacing outlying villages. And I can introduce, like perhaps in the next session, maybe the players come across refugees fleeing from those villages, and they can say, oh, well, we've been under attack by this evil horde, and they'll be like, oh yeah, we heard some rumors about those like a few sessions ago, and it gives you that sense that the game world's moving on.
Yeah, I think, and also I think that's what the timer's for as well. You know, I was saying about the timer.
Yeah,
I think that's because I remember Adam Cobbold mentioning it in one of his videos that he does, where he goes, you know, when you're doing a front, you know, it's the GM's turn to go and cackle, you know, ha, and tick things off. As if they don't do something about it, things will tick down until the, you know, I can't say it. Inevitable. Is that the word?
Yeah, the inevitable conclusion.
It happens. It happens. They haven't lifted a finger about it, and suddenly, you know, Samuel, who fell down the well, you know, if they went to save him right away, you know, wouldn't have encountered the demon that possessed his body that destroyed the entire village. But I mean, I understand it, but how I mean, I'm stumbling now, but I understand the concepts. It's just trying to, how do you put that concept down on paper? And the other things is like, do you have to just stick to that? You know, it's going on about like the well, let me like, you know, you're going on about you're saying about, oh god, like a cult, yeah, arcane enemies, cursed place, and stuff like that. Yeah. You don't have to just stick to those, do you? You could come up with your own kind.
I don't think you do. I mean, I think they're just there as examples, and obviously the different games that are sort of use the Apocalypse World engine all have their own sort of different bits of flavour because they're all different settings.
Yeah.
But I don't think you really have to stick them. I prefer to see those as like a sort of starting off point. I mean, let's face it, I've given the moves for like the ambitious organisation. If, however, I decide that, they might do something outside that moves, I wouldn't let myself be constrained by what's in the book. In terms of getting it all down on paper, the way I normally do it is I start off with, obviously, what sort of enemy, what sort of complication is the danger, as it's called in Dungeonworld, and then I jump straight to the end and say, right, well, if that danger reaches its worst possible conclusion, what's going to happen and how is that going to change my campaign work? Because let's face it, if you've got something which isn't actually going to change the campaign world or the players' lives for the worst, they're not really going to be motivated to interfere or to try and stop it.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that before. I've heard like a lot of people say, you know, start at the end and work backwards, because then you know where you're going and you can work out how to get there a lot easier than just weaving your way through it. But yeah, I mean, because for me, like I find if I write something, like, because I used to do bullet points, I just bullet point down like bits. But I'd find that if I bullet pointed it, even though it's supposed to be like free flow and, you know, completely open to interpretation, it would still become railroady. Do you know what I mean? But I think with fronts, you don't really have that, because you've got that danger, then you've got that danger, and it can happen when you really feel like it needs to happen. Like, you could actually have like about 6 foot fronts going off at once, literally, you know.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And you could have, like, they encounter this, and then they do this bit, and then this bit, and then they do the second danger from the first front, and, you know, and you get this web, I suppose, a web of entangled plot, and you know, and you know, you get this more. Is it called immersive role play? Yeah, it's called immersive role play. But you get things from coming out of it. Yeah. Like I mean, like I said, I could imagine, like, you know, some of these fronts that you could do, you know. I could imagine that they could actually give you sessions worth of, like,
material. Very much so. And I mean, one of the first things it says about fronts in Dungeonworld is that if you start off with something as an adventure front, so normally it's like 1, 2, 3 sessions worth, there's no reason why that can't move to becoming a campaign front if it sort of expands. And like I don't know, let's say you've got like an orc horde or whatever. And originally the idea for the adventure front is they're just going to attack this village, smash it to pieces, and move on. And then the players really start sort of like looking into in depth what's going on with this orc horde and why they're there. You can easily then go, right, well, everyone seems interested in that. I'm going to shift this to a campaign front, add a few more details or expand it a little bit. And like you say, you get vast swathes of plot out of it.
So when you have you actually done that? Have you turned the front? There we go, front. Have you turned the front into an actual campaign? Have you had that?
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned before we came on air the Sapphire Island campaign that I ran, and that's been the main Dungeonworld game I ran. And pretty much what I did for that, as well as doing the world being the sort of expanding outwards, and you ask a lot of questions of the players and get them to fill in a lot of the world detail, as well as doing that, basically at the start of the game, I didn't really create any campaign fronts. I just made a series of adventure fronts that I threw in mentions of them all in the first session. And then I basically just went, right, which ones do the players seem most interested in? And I picked one of those, and then I just expanded it into a campaign front.
All right, cool. It makes it. I mean, for what they are, I mean, I think they're brilliant. I mean, the concept-wise, they're brilliant. It's just you've got to get your head around it, and I don't think I'm entirely got my head around it. I think, what I'll have to do is actually just keep doing it until I go. Yeah. All right, that's what. Okay, that's that. That fits there. That fits there.
It does get a lot easier to get your head around with practice. I mean, the way I tend to do it is, like I say, I've already said I work out the enemy or the main threat. Then I jump to the end and say, what's the worst possible outcome? What I tend to do after that is I sort of jump back to near the beginning and I say, okay, well, assuming the player characters are going to interfere with whatever the plot is, like the horde or whatever, what's going to be their first reaction? Yeah. And then I normally do bullet points like you were suggesting, but aside from having the main sort of danger, having their first response and the impending doom at the end, I generally then leave them blank. And what I'll do is, as the players interfere, I'll go, right, each time they sort of interfere with that plot, I'll go, all right, okay, well, how's that going to change the plot? How's the horde going to respond to that? And I'll write an extra bullet point and I'll fill one of them in. Or if they're not getting involved in it, I'll go, right, okay, it's moving towards the end game. What's their next move? Maybe they start wiping out small towns instead of villages, and I'll fill a blank in with that.
Yeah, and that's a danger, isn't it? That's a danger. Then is it not? That's a because it's supposed to be like, was it 2 or 3 dangers for an adventure event? Is that right?
Yeah, it's normally like 2 to 3
or,
dangers per.
Or if you're keeping it going, could you add more dangers to it? Is there or is that
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any sort of hard limit as to how many dangers you can have on a front. I just think, well, I think you have to use a bit of judgment, but once you get beyond a certain amount, I think they wouldn't be occurring enough in game to sort of make keeping notes on them worthwhile.
Yeah.
I think you have to very much sort of focus on the main ones. And I mean, I did a few for my Sapphire Island campaign where I started off with a few dangers, and then I was like, well, 1 or 2 of them aren't really getting used. They've not really come up, whereas some others have been bought in. I'm just going to like quietly retire those ones that aren't really getting used and sort of shuffle them into the background or incorporate them into an already existing one.
All right, so you wouldn't let that just play out without the players' interaction, then? You wouldn't.
It depends. If I think it has interesting consequences or it's going to impact, then yes, I probably would do. However, if it's something that like doesn't seem really particularly interesting or it doesn't really seem to fit with the way the main game is going, I'd be quite happy just to push that to one side and move on with something else.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. Okay, because like I said, like I want to do a Judge. I'm running for my club a Judge Dredd game. I'm using the Traveller version because.
Oh yeah.
Because I vaguely remember it being good. I mean, I've owned all the versions of Judge Dredd games. The D20 version was the worst, and then I think the Games Workshop one was good for its time. Yeah, and then obviously the Traveller one is really
I've only run the Traveller one. I've run a few one-shots for that, and I found it quite enjoyable.
But yeah, my idea that I've got is like obviously because with the concepts of Dungeonworld and stuff, where you start the game in conflict, don't you? You start off with a bit of a bang, don't you?
That's it. Yeah, you're supposed to sort of start off in the middle of the action, as it were.
Yeah, which I didn't do on my Dungeonworld game that I was running, well, have been running online. I messed up there. I should have just started in action. But the idea is that they're judges on patrol or whatever, and they encounter a moped, one of those big mobile home things, and it's like driving out of erratically, and it's out of control, and they have to take it down. So that would be a danger, right?
Yeah.
But the idea is that when they get on board, they find that there's loads people dead. It appears to have been used for growing coffee or sugar or some illegal substance that's illegal in Judge Dredd.
Yeah.
And then the gang that's robbed this is called Starbucks. Because that's in the way of Judge Dredd, that's generally how it would work.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And then obviously, from there they would like start finding things out, and eventually, obviously, it would come to it. The overreaching like mob boss that's pushing all these caffeine and sugar out as a drug. Obviously, that will be the final. So, but how can you? There's no. I mean, for Judge Dredd, how could there be? How would Grim Portents work for that, and Impending Dooms work for that? I mean, what? I mean, do you see what I mean with that?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Well, just obviously, I'm going to be fairly general because I don't want to get too much into the nitty gritty of your plot in case any of you people are watching it, but the way I'd work Impending Dooms is what you really need to do is you really need to think about your mob boss, who seems to be the overarching sort of plot. He's obviously some sort of criminal mastermind, I'm assuming, because he's behind all of this stuff that's going on. Yeah. So what you need to think is, what's his end game, and possibly sort of raise that up a bit. Because if his end game's just to make a few credits selling illegal substances, that doesn't really have like a massive impact, certainly not in terms of Judge Dredd. Yeah. Whereas if his aim's to like sort of blackmail his way into like controlling some politicians or sort of like influencing the government of Mega City 1, or even influencing the judges maybe, that's obviously going to have a more profound and a more wide-spanning effect on your campaign.
Yeah.
So first of all, I'd think about what this mob boss's main end goal is.
All right. So, and you can't have it just get rich, because that's all that's what that's all I can think of. But obviously
You could have it to be get rich. If his aim's just to make a lot of money.
But I suppose.
Sorry, go ahead, dude.
But I suppose actually, thinking as you've said, it could actually be to control the sector, couldn't it? It could be.
Yeah.
He literally controls the sector, and maybe then reaches out to neighbouring sectors and stuff. But yeah, okay, I get what you mean there.
Yeah, I mean, if his idea is just to like make a load of credits, then obviously you've got some conflict because the players are judges. He's doing illegal things; they want to stop him, of course. Yeah. But it's not really a sort of a personal thing, because aside from the fact he's doing it illegally, if he ends up with a load of credits at the end of the day,
yeah,
it's not a major sort of alteration to the setting. There's just another like big sort of crime don with a lot of money. Whereas, like you say, if he's trying to take control of an entire sector and make it his own like private domain,
yeah,
that's obviously got far-reaching impacts. I always think that the impending doom should always be something that make a fundamental change for the worse in your setting, because that means the players have got a really good reason for interfering and for getting involved with that.
So that could actually be the campaign, couldn't it? That could be the campaign front, which is about this mob boss, and all the other bits could actually just be adventure fronts, can't they? They could literally just
exactly.
Did I say fronts again? Sorry.
That's fine. But because once you've decided that, like, assuming you go with this idea of this guy's trying to take control of a block or whatever, that then opens you up to decide what other stuff he's doing. Because obviously, if he's going to take a block, he needs to defend it. So presumably, he's going to be trying to get weapons from somewhere.
Yeah. Who's
he getting the weapons off? That could potentially be like another adventure front where the players are trying to like identify his supplier, or maybe stop these weapons coming into this area of the city.
And it could be completely unrelated as well.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, if you can manage it, it works really well when there's what looks like a series of unconnected adventure fronts. Then as the players go through them a bit more, they suddenly work out that, like, some of them, not all of them, because obviously if every adventure leads back to the mob boss, it's going to be a bit unbelievable.
Yeah.
But just having a few of them where they suddenly find out that, like, the money for these weapons was coming from this mob boss who they've dealt with before in some other adventure. It links it all together. And again, it gives that sense that the game world's a wider place.
Yeah. I mean, just from talking about it, you can see that, that fronts have a massive benefit to, like, as a GM who doesn't like to write things because I'm not very good at it, but just to break it down into like its core component, literally, this is the idea. This is the next idea. This is what's going to happen here. This is this bit, and this is this bit. Now the rest is blank. Just fill it in as you go along, which is brilliant. For someone who actually enjoys being in. Because everything I've done up to now has generally been improv. So I just make it up as I go along, and I'm really good at starts, beginning it, then the middles, but the ends. It's always the endings that I never know where to take it. Always, I don't know.
I used to find that quite difficult myself because, like you say, it's very easy when you're starting off because you're like full of excitement for like the new plot and the game you're running, etc. Then the middles are the meat of your game, and everything's moving along and the plot's progressing. But then tying it all up in a satisfactory manner can be quite difficult. Whereas one of the benefits that fronts offer is that one of the first things you think about is the end. So even if your player characters don't get involved in stuff, you know what the end game's going to be. Yeah. You know that the mob boss is the mob boss. Sorry, I'm doing it now. The mob boss is going to take control of his block, and he's maybe going to start expanding, and that could spill into a block war or something along those lines. And you know that that's the case. So in a worst case scenario, you can say, right, I've got a potential end point for the campaign there. It ends with this huge block war. which
Yeah.
itself would be quite interesting. But you've also got the thing of going, right, well, because I've left most of it blank, as you say, as I'm bringing in these adventure fronts and the players are interacting with it, I already know what my mob boss's aims are, so it's easier for me to decide how he's going to respond to finding out the judges are messing around in his business.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's good. He might even try and bribe them and stuff like that, or try and bribe higher ups, or get a judge in on the take so that he knows how they're moving, so that he's always one step ahead. I mean, that would be also that would probably be on the campaign front, wouldn't it? It's front, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the handy things about it is obviously we've talked about in Dungeonworld that it gives you these actions, these moves that you can, whenever the plot's not been involved for a bit, you can say, oh, well, this corrupt organisation is going to bribe an official, and you can jot that down in your plan to say, this is what's going on in the background. But you don't have to stick to those specific actions. I mean, if you're a Judge Dredd game, if you decide, well, this evil crime boss, he's going to try and blackmail a judge or something to like deal with the player characters, or he's going to try and bribe their superiors to get them like posted somewhere a bit further away from him, you can still do that. And because you know that it all has its origins with this front that you've got going on, if the players then suddenly turn around and go, oh, that was a bit suspicious that our boss suddenly randomly like posted us to an entirely different part of the city, and they start investigating it, you've got somewhere to go with that. You've got the sort of spine of the adventure and the sort of structure of it already there, so you can do your improv still. In a way, it seems like the best of both worlds to me. You've got enough planning to give you the structure, but you've still got enough sort of wiggle room and enough sort of space to do bits of improv, so it's still interesting to you and it's not entirely scripted and railroaded.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I like. That's why I want to get my head around them, because I want to use them. Do you know what I mean? I really want to use them. I mean, I can see them working in a Deadlands campaign I've had in my head for ages, which is I don't know if you've read Deadlands ever.
Yeah.
I think you've got Dead. I think they're over there, aren't they?
Yeah, just
the
over
there. Yeah. Have you ever read Doomtown or Bus? The whole Gomorrah stuff.
I have, yeah.
That will work perfectly with fronts and stuff, because there's so much going on. If you sort of like got them all down on fronts and the campaign front, you could actually have that, because I've tried running it before and I've never been properly able to do it. But with fronts, I'd be able to properly do that. Because I know where the end is, I know exactly how to get there and stuff like that. What other games could it work? I mean, it just could work. It could work with so many games. It could just make your life as a GM so much easier. You don't have to.
I mean, to be fair, I mean, the Jade Punk game that I'm running at the minute, obviously using the Fate system, effectively the plots I've got for that, I'm using like a version of the front system, because I've got like my two main campaign fronts, which are what's the governor's plan for the city and this huge war that's going on. But we've also got like a number of adventure fronts where we've got like criminal gang activity, stuff like that going on. And although I've not got them written on like the front sheets, I've basically just got like the threats, the impending dooms, and my bullet point list. And every time I advance that plot a bit, or the players advance it, I just fill in another one of those bullet points.
Yeah.
And if I need to, if I say maybe get to the end of my list and I go, well, there's still a bit of time to go before it gets to like the end game, I can always just put in more bullet points and expand it a bit, and that's not a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I just as a GM who, I'm not a lazy GM, but like I said, I have a certain problem that I can't write things. I can't seem to jot anything down. Not very well. I've never been able to take notes. That stems from school. That stems from my problems at school. But the fronts, because you're not plotting everything out to the to the final T, because it gives you room to do stuff. You could even they could even go off on a tandem and you could almost plug that into its own front itself. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I mean,
there's nothing wrong with if you, because like I say, it does provide you with a bit of structure, but without drilling down to the nth degree and having everything plotted out. But if you say you have one of your bullet points written down, and then later on you go, oh, we never did work out what happened with the mob boss's like second lieutenant after the players arrested him and sent him off to the cubes. You can always later on go, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if we had an adventure front where like he managed to escape and he's planning on getting revenge on the judges who put him to jail? And you can easily just spin off like a little adventure front or even another campaign front if you wanted it to be a major plot from that one single starting point.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, from my point of view, I think fronts, I keep going around in circles, but I just think the concept behind them is so simple. In the fact that it's such a good aid for GMing that I think, I personally think that, from now on, that will be my way that I'm going to do all my games is going to be based on using a modified, variation, like you said.
I know certainly since I read Dungeonworld originally, sort of like ages and ages ago, I've used a version of fronts in like every game I've run since then, just because it is such a nice way of getting everything written down, but it's short, it's punchy, it's to the point. You don't have to read when you come to look at it later on and go, oh, what's going on with this plot? You don't have to look at ridiculous levels of notes. You've just got your neat little list there. You can look at it and go, oh yeah, so the players did this last time they interacted with this plot, they did this, they arrested the lieutenant and sent him to the cubes. Right, okay, so how's this going to move on now? You can just fill in one little point under that, and it not only makes it easy to look at, and like I say, it's very short and punchy.
Yeah.
It also means you can keep track of all of your different plots, and it gives the players this sense that the world moves on. Even if they do nothing with some of the plots, the world's still moving on, and that makes it seem like a more sort of three-dimensional place.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why I've been reading Apocalypse World is because people have told me that this explains fronts better than in Dungeonworld.
Yeah.
Just because obviously the setting itself is similar to Judge Dredd anyway.
Yeah.
Post-apocalyptic future. So I mean that's why I've been looking at this. But obviously my bread and butter has been Dungeonworld for the past year and a bit, I think, really. I mean the other this Truncheon have you got this?
No, I've not got that one.
It is literally it's just basically unabridged bridged version of Dungeonworld.
Oh right, okay.
So basically it's got all the rules, just none of the fluff in it. So it's quite useful as a GM. So it's really useful for you as the GM to just flick through it and find the rules.
I might have to look into picking up.
I think it's super cheap as well from drive-through, and I think the PDF is pay what you want as well, so you could just go zero and have it. But yeah, I mean I've bought quite a lot of like Apocalypse games, like I've got Monster of the Week the other week because I just like the idea of like Buffy and Supernatural,
I have got a copy of that on PDF, but I've had a quick skim through it, but I've not actually got around to reading it yet. I mainly bought that because my wife's a big fan of shows like Buffy, etc. So I was thinking, because I know she really enjoyed Dungeonworld, because she's very much a fan of like D&D and games like that.
Yeah.
And Dungeonworld's the best system there is as far as she's concerned, because it gets all the flavour of D&D. But the rules are a lot more streamlined and sort of modernized, if you will.
I think the other thing as well is that because the players have been putting into the world as well, they almost have ownership of that world as well. So it makes it more them. So they have more of a connection to it. That's my personal belief. Anyway.
I very much agree with you. I mean, I think inevitably, if you've had a say in how something's developed, you're more interested in it. Because if we're playing a Dungeonworld game and you say, I want to play an elf wizard or whatever, and I basically go, here's a huge tome of information about how the elves are in this setting, aside from going, oh shit, I've got to read through all this like massive stack of like material he's given me, also it's just something I've handed to you. Whereas if you say, "Oh, I'm playing an elven wizard," and I say to you, "So, how highly placed are wizards in elven society, and what's elven society like?" And this is what I did in my Sapphire Island game. All of the details about the various settings and the different civilizations, they're all drawn out from asking questions to the players. So saying to someone, "Oh, you want to be from the Northlands? Right, tell me what the Northlands are like. What sort of societies have they got?" And because because they'd had that input, they felt like it was theirs. And whenever something to do with that bit of the plot came up, that player really felt involved and they were really keen to get on with it.
I've been wanting to do a Dungeonworld game where everything's dialed up to 10, like airships, post-apocalyptic, like magical war, whatever, a bit like Dark Sun or something, and just I think the more I find, I think that the more the players screw themselves in the world, the more interesting it is. So, the Dungeonworld game I'm running at the moment isn't what I hoped it could have been. But the one I won first off was brilliant because they'd screwed themselves over because basically there was so many undead because the way they decided that the life cycle happened and what was going on in the spirit worlds, that the dead were just constantly rising. So the way they could only deal with the dead was they had to burn them, and that was it. But it just makes, I think I think when I next do a Dungeonworld game or something, I will probably try and push them in that direction. I don't know if you can push them in that direction.
Well, I think as with any game that sort of relies on the players sort of taking ownership of the background, the quality of the game, you very much get out what you put in. So if you've got players who are more used to sort of having everything handed to them in terms of the background, and they may be a little bit sketchier on putting in themselves, then they probably won't get as much out of a game like Dungeonworld as if you've got people who just go, "All right, so I get to decide everything about the orcs because I'm playing an orc," and then they just throw themselves in there. I mean, for my game, we had one guy who was like, "Oh, I'm the exiled son of the previous Northlander king because he got usurped and killed by someone, and then I poisoned him, and poison's like a forbidden weapon because it's a coward's weapon in the north, and they're all sort of like big barbarians. You should fight people with swords."
Yeah,
I was like, "That's brilliant. We can use that." And like every time he got involved with Northlanders, they all knew who he was because he was this like reviled person who'd dared to use this like forbidden weapon, and that was great because he really threw himself into that and really sort of went, "Well, I know it makes life difficult for my character, but having your character's life made difficult and complicated is sort of what role play is about, really."
Yeah.
I mean, if everything went your character's way, it wouldn't be very interesting at all.
No, I agree with that. I mean, yeah, the more interesting you make the background, the more fun you have, the more the more enjoyment you get out of it. I think is what happens there. But yeah, I think from my humble opinion, fronts are going to be the way forward for me. I
certainly. Sorry, go ahead.
Once I've figured it, once I've got my head completely around it, I'm slowly getting there. I think I've got a grasp of it, and what I'll probably do is just get some scrap paper and just start jotting down some ideas and build it from that, and then put that onto fronts and stuff like that.
That's it. I mean, I don't think that anyone ever gets anything like 100% right. I mean, even with like the games I'm running now, and I've used fronts in a fair amount of different games since my first Dungeonworld game, I still look at things and go, "Oh, I could have done that a bit better." But I think that's a good thing because you're always sort of with your next game going, "Oh, well, I can sort that little bit of a problem I had out in my next game." You're always looking to sort of improve it.
I mean, that even work for Star Wars as well. Star Wars Edge of the Empire, whichever Star Wars game you're running. But I think
I mean, I'm running an Edge of Empire game soon, and I'll certainly be using fronts to like deal with the plots in that. And I even use the sort of Dungeonworld Apocalypse style like rules thing with most games. Sorry, rules thing, world creation thing with the way you ask the questions a lot. You ask the players a lot of questions, and you sort of create the world with them. I use that in most of my games now.
Oh, but could that? I mean, I don't know if that would work with a Star Wars game, though, would it? Ask it because there's all an established universe.
Well, the way I'm doing it in the game I'm running at the minute, I've restricted everything to just stuff out the core edge of Empire, but because we're also fairly new to it, and I didn't want loads of like weird supplements coming in. But basically, what I'm doing is I'm running it in a sector of space that has been sort of isolated from the rest of the galaxy by like hyperspace storms, and we're going to have an Imperial presence and a Hutt presence, or some sort of equivalent crime presence in the sector, and then the actual like systems that are there, I'm going to get a lot of input from the players about what the systems are like. And it also neatly avoids that whole thing where basically if you're near Coruscant or any of the core worlds and you cross the Empire in a serious way, that's you done.
Well, maybe, but then I don't know, you can then sort of move out to the edges, couldn't you, then?
Yeah. But what I'm trying to do, and I admit it is an experiment, because it'll be the first Age of Empire game I've run, the first Star Wars game I've run for quite some time. The idea of having the isolated sector is there is an Imperial presence there, but it's only a presence, so they can't just sort of get on the communications to Coruscant and say, "Oh, send us a few like dozen Star Destroyers to come and deal with this problem."
Yeah. Are you going to have a rebel presence as well then?
Yes, there will be. Yeah.
All right. Because what I would do is, ideally, if this could happen, I'd probably like write a few, like a front for each world, maybe, or something. I mean, that might be too much anyway, but I'd write a few fronts for like the different worlds, and then like when they get to that world, then they encounter that front that's on that.
Yeah, I mean, what my plan is at the minute is I'm going to have a campaign front for each of like the main groups.
Yeah.
So that like a campaign front for the Empire, a campaign front for the Hutts. So I'll have like their end goals ready, etc., and for the rebels, etc. And then I'll do an adventure front for each of the like systems they go to. Well, probably 2 or 3 adventure fronts for each of the systems they go to, actually, depending on how it breaks down. And then if any of those systems take their particular interest, there's no reason, as we said earlier, some of those adventure fronts can't be expanded into like additional campaign fronts or linked up with the existing campaign fronts.
Yeah. I mean, I just see that, you know, they can be used so many different. They can be used so many different ways. I think once you get your head around them, they're just this, you know, this tool that is absolutely perfect for a GM, because you don't have to put that much prep in. I mean, when I was watching your, you know, your prep for your game on the video, I think you spent 30 minutes maybe prepping it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Some of it was like filler, but you know, you spent about 30 minutes prepping, and you literally had probably a good few sessions worth of things to happen. Do you know what I mean?
No, I entirely agree, and I think that is another benefit of the front system, because it's so to the point and it's so sort of bullet point style. It really, after you've been using it for a while, it really gets you to think in that sort of mindset where you sort of trim away the excess stuff that you might otherwise do it during preparation, and you just sort of concentrate on the main points you need to get down in your prep, which does vastly speed up and decrease the amount of time you need to spend doing it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, what was it? Probably about 30, 40 minutes, I think you spent, wasn't it?
Well, that's it. I mean, the way I do things now is I tend to spend a lot of time before I sit down to write anything, just sort of like idly mulling out things over and thinking, oh, like, what am I going to do in the next session? What are the players doing, etc. But when it actually comes to sitting down and going, right, I'm going to put something down on paper or in a notepad file or whatever, that process is now far quicker than it used to be. Because I used to sit down and write hundreds and hundreds of like words in like documents, and half of it I wouldn't even use. I'd just end up with it at the end of the session and go, well, I could have spent that time doing something else.
Yeah.
But because now I've got into this mindset to go, right, I need to focus on the main points, and the rest of it gives me a bit of room to like improvise, because I do enjoy improvising as well. It's really enabled me to sort of trim down any excess from my prep.
Do you find that do you take the concept behind it where you start them already in action? Do you do that for nearly every game?
I mean, the whole idea of like the in media res, where it's best to like start off with like a quick punchy action scene and then sort of resolve how it occurred later, can be very useful. One of the things I find is, especially if you're doing character gen at the very start of the same session, or to be honest, even if you've done it as a separate session beforehand, people have spent all their time genning these characters, and they're really like fired up to like play it, and they want to jump in on the action and like get on with stuff and see how their characters work and get to role play in their characters. Whereas if you sort of gen this character and you're really excited about it, and then the first scene's like fairly bland and not a great deal happens, it almost feels like a little bit of a letdown. You want to jump straight into the exciting stuff. So starting off with like a combat scene or a high action scene, and then later on sort of leaning into the more sort of subtle stuff is a great way to sort of almost get that out of the player character's system straight away.
I also find that combat teaches the person the system as well. It's also a good way of learning the system.
Well, yeah, that's it. I mean, certainly I've found with Dungeonworld and with many other systems, a lot of people want to jump straight into a game and start rolling some dice when they've created a character. They're keen, they're enthused, they've got the character, they want to start playing it straight away. So if you've got your character and straight away just use Star Wars as a reference, well, look at the first Star Wars film. You start off with like stormtroopers attacking a ship, blasters firing, etc., and you only find out the reason behind it later. I mean, that's something I did with my Jade Point game. I started him off on a sabotaged airship that was about to crash into the city, and then we led on to all the other stuff that was behind that later on. So it meant that the player characters were just sort of like straight away jumping into acting as their characters and trying to work out what was going on. Yeah, I've got very fast and furious
because I'm running a Hellas game, which is like Greeks in Space game on Sunday nights, which is like space opera thingy. We've only just done characters, and I mean I'm gonna be using fonts. Oh God, fronts. If I say fronts, everyone, I mean no. If I say fonts, I mean fronts. All right, just ignore me. But yeah, I mean, I've got an idea for jumping into the action. Like, literally, the idea is like one of the players comes running into a room. They're all in the room and closes the door behind them with a panic look on his face because something's chasing them. And I'm going to let them decide what's chasing them and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's great because straight away you're asking for their input. So it straight away gives them the idea of what sort of game it's going to be, that they're going to have a voice in how the game plays out, which in a lot of games you only really have control over your character, and that's it. So although it can take people a little bit of getting used to it, they actually have an input to the setting. Once they do, I've certainly found in my experience that people tend to be far more invested and far more interested in it because they help to create it.
Yeah. I mean, the other game I want to try now as well is Worlds in Peril, which is the superhero version of like Apocalypse World.
All right, okay, I've not played that one.
It's only just come out. They kickstarted it a few months ago, and it's just come out in PDF. But I mean, in my opinion, that superhero genre will work perfectly well with like the Apocalypse system. In my mind,
yeah. I mean, like I said, I've used fronts with 99%, I'd say, of the games I've run since originally finding out about them in Dungeonworld, just because it, like I say, as far as I'm concerned, it's the best of both worlds. It gives you that structure, the overall structure of your campaign. It gives you enough background and enough planning to when the players react or they interact with the plot to say, right, where's this going from here, to record it down, keep your notes nice and clear, but also it keeps you interested as a GM, because let's face it, if everything was 100% scripted, it'd be no fun for the GM.
No.
You'd just be doing everything by rote. Whereas, and that's one of the reasons these stake questions I mentioned earlier can be quite useful, where you write down a few things that you want to find out in play.
They are quite hard to think as well. I find them quite a hard thing to think, because what am I right? You know, what question do I want to answer from this? I don't know. What do the heroes think of the orcs?
Yeah, they can be a bit difficult to come up with.
Or how for take the Judge Dredd game, perhaps they will think, how far does this rabbit hole go? You know, I mean, I suppose that is a legitimate question, but you know, sometimes it's quite hard to think of the actual like question, a decent question.
It can be difficult to think of them at the start, but as with a lot of games and a lot of things to do with fronts, there's nothing wrong with leaving those state questions blank, and then later on when something comes up, just jotting it in and going, oh well, I don't really know how that's going to go. I'm quite interested to find out.
Yeah.
So you might just use our previous example of the lieutenant of the mob boss breaking out of the cubes and looking for revenge. You might say, how are the characters going to react when the lieutenant threatens one of their loved ones or their family or whatever?
Yeah.
And then you might go, well, I'm interested to see that. And you can just, there's nothing wrong with writing that in and then just seeing how that plays out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's probably a good idea. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think, as is the case with like Fate, which is obviously one of my favorite systems, a lot of the character gen in that, you're almost encouraged to, if you can't think of every detail at the start, it's better to leave a few bits blank or vague and then detail them out later on than just to like shove something in there that you're not happy with for the sake of writing something. And I think it's very much the same with Fronts and Dungeonworld and Apocalypse World and those sort of games in general. It's far better if you go, oh, well, I want to have a few campaign fronts, but I can only think of one or two. All right, I'll just do the one or two. And the third one, I can easily promote an adventure front into a campaign one, or I can base one on something that occurs in the game later on than it is just to like put one in that you're not really interested in.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, oh God, what was I going to say? My mind's gone. But no, I think, yeah, the questions are probably the hardest things to put down. But yeah, I can see you just do it as you go along. If you can think of something, or if something crops up and you go, oh, that's interesting, and just jot it down rather than like being sitting there staring at a blank. Because generally, what happens if you're doing that, it's what happens to me is you end up just staring at a blank page.
Yeah,
and you'll just end up staring at a blank page. One
of the benefits of sort of coming up with stuff a little bit later on is, like you say, if you just use an analogy, if you give someone a blank piece of paper and you say, draw me anything you want, a lot of people will look at the paper and they'll just go, well, I could draw anything. I've no idea what to draw. And like you said, they'll just stare at the paper. Whereas if you give someone a piece of paper and you say, oh, draw me a car, everyone will draw something different. But because they've got a little bit of information, it just gets you over that initial hurdle. So in terms of fronts, if you leave something blank and then base it on something that happens in the game, you've already got that little jump start to get you over the first hurdle.
That's it. And I just remembered that I remembered what I was going to say as well. When you write those questions down, you actually have to, because once you've written it down, you have to find out what the answer to that question is.
I mean, there's no point writing a state question down if you're not interested in finding out what the answer is. So if the lieutenant sort of threatening one of the player characters, our loved ones, isn't something you're interested in, there's no point putting it down as a state question. You may as well leave it blank until something that you are interested in comes up.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, all of them have got all of the Apocalypse or Powered by Apocalypse game, all slightly different. Like Apocalypse World, you have like your first session, you've got like a sheet to work with on that, and you set up relationships and stuff. Because I think Apocalypse World is more compact rather than like Dungeonworld, which is perhaps more epic
I mean, I think from my experience, Apocalypse World focuses, like say, more on the relationships because it's more about survival and how you as a community and as a group survive in this like apocalyptic scenario, whereas Dungeonworld's a bit more sort of sprawling and sort of quest based because it is based on Dungeons and Dragons, so it's more sort of epic fantasy.
I mean, you have answered nearly all my questions as well, and you sort of like you have helped me in the fact that, you know, it has sorted my brain out on the fears that I had for writing a front, and I'll take that. I'll be able to take that away, or even if I need to, I can always just refer back to this video and watch it again and listen to myself and go, oh God, what am I rabbiting on about?
It's all right. I do that myself.
I try not to watch my own videos because I get embarrassed and shy about it.
I did make the mistake of watching like one of my really early ones like the other day because someone asked me a question about something I said in it, and I was like, "Oh, best watch the video just to make sure I remembered what I actually originally said." And as I was looking through it, I was like, "Oh,
Yeah, I say and oh a lot. That's right. Say that a lot. I've got better at it, I think.
Well, yeah, I think with videos and YouTube videos, as with fronts, you inevitably get better at it the more you do and the more practice you have, because you become more familiar with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's what the advice I'd give you overall now is. I'm glad I've answered some of your questions, but the best thing you can do now is, like I say, get some scrap paper, start writing down some fronts. You'll probably get some where you think, oh no, that's not particularly good, but it's better you try writing down 10 and get maybe 3 or 4 that aren't particularly good than, like you say, you stare at that blank piece of paper and don't get anything written down.
Yep. I'll be doing that. Well, probably not tonight, probably tomorrow when I'm a little bit better. But yeah, cool. Thanks for your help.
No problems. You're more than welcome. Thanks for anyone who's watching this video now or in the future. I hope that's answered a few questions about fronts. I'll put a link to my original Dungeonworld prep video that James referenced in the link below. And if I can find any details online about fronts documentation, I'll also link those for anyone who wants to have a bit more of a thorough look at those. So thanks very much for watching. And James, thank you very much for joining me on this video.
No, thank you very much.
No problem at all. And we will say goodbye for now. Take care.
Bye.